I really don't have a hell of a lot to profound shit to talk about. But I've been awful sick the last week. And I think it's because of all the rain we've had here. We've had a ton of rain here. Almost every day since I've been on vacation. And I think it's caused all those spores and shit in the air. And so it's triggered a sinus infection. And I have been sicker than hell. I haven't even hardly seen family or done anything. I have a relative that's had to be hospitalized and all that, and it's all this other stuff. So I'm here by myself, and anyway, to try to pass the time away, or whatever, I've been watching a lot of DVDs. Well, at least until I think I might have burned my television out. I've had it for about 9 years, so it might be time for an upgrade to a smart TV. So I may end up doing that. I have to check the connections tomorrow before I go out and spend the money, which isn't going to be that much anyway. But I've been, until that moment, and I do have other players that I've got, so I can still watch, although I can't watch any Blu-ray. But I was watching the complete series of Colt 45, and that was from Warner Brothers in the 1950s. They had all these great classic westerns from that time. And Colt 45 was probably the least well known of the shows. And I don't remember it unless they syndicated it in reruns, which I kind of doubt, because I think there were only about 67 episodes. But I was like 5 years old when it went off the air in 1960, so this goes back a hell of a long time. But anyway, I was enjoying it. And it starred an actor named, well, his real name was William Erskine Strange. And so obviously when he went into acting, he couldn't be called Strange. Okay. So they changed it to Wade Preston. And Wade Preston had some acting experience and such. And he was married to this actress, and I could look it up. But she helped further his career. They weren't married for very long. And so he had this show for 3 years, I think. And what happened was, and I noticed this in the Blu-ray thing. You look at the second season and there's only 13 episodes. Well, that's because Wade Preston, and other prominent actors, that includes James Garner and others that were working for Warner Brothers, they staged like a walkout during that time. They were in dispute with Warner Brothers. They were paid shitty, relatively shitty. They worked a lot of hours. The working conditions weren't the best. And James Garner basically was railroaded out of Maverick and went into movies. And but Preston came back, I guess. I haven't seen it that far, all the episodes yet. But anyway, that explains why there were only 13 episodes. And then the bulk of the rest of the episodes were reruns from the first season. So anyway, it's a good show. He wore a mustache later on, but he looked better without one, I think. That's just my opinion. But later on, after this show was over, I don't think he ever had another series. And he would do occasional acting and stuff, but later on, I think in the 70s, he developed cancer, and then he died in 1992, I believe it was. He was aged 62. He was born in 1929, and he spent his final years in Lovelock, Nevada, and so that wasn't far from where I lived in Reno. I mean, it was where O.J. was incarcerated, in that prison nearby. But anyway, Preston spent his final years there, and he's buried there in their cemetery under his real name. But anyway, it's a decent Western, and I think I mentioned before, maybe 4 years ago when I was talking about Westerns, and they, it was optimal. Half hour long Westerns are optimal. The storylines move, they get to the point, whereas an hour, it's kind of stretching it. It's harder to sustain it. And definitely an hour and a half is murder. You know, to make it into a mini movie. You know, Wagon Train was one of those. The Virginian was another one of those. Cimarron Strip was another one of those that went 90 minutes. And that's pushing it. That's really too much to sustain a series for with that episodes that long, especially given all the work that's involved in making a series. But anyway, in Colt 45 they had 26 episodes in the full seasons, but they were already starting to shift with fewer and fewer seasons and then show reruns during the summertime. So anyway, that was that show. And then of course I've been watching Rawhide, which is not my discs are not Blu-ray, so I could watch that in alternative DVD players. And you know, that was one of my favorite shows as a kid. My dad used to watch it. I used to watch it. There was a tiny bit of comic relief there with Paul Brinegar playing Wishbone and oh, hell's bells, James Murdoch playing Mushy, kind of like his sidekick, and all this. There was a little bit of comic relief in there. And of course, that show helped put Clint Eastwood into prominence. But when you see the DVDs and the covers of them, you'd have thought he was the star of the series. He was not the star of the series. He was second lead, you might see. He wasn't really even lead, but Eric Fleming was actually the star of it. And when Fleming left, after the 64-65 season, I believe it was, then they made Eastwood's character, Rowdy Yates, the trail boss. And what happened was, he really... Now this sounds absurd, given all the fame and money and all the stuff he's done in all these years, and I'm shocked to hell he's 94 years old. And he's going to make it to 100. So is William Shatner, who's 93. And I can't even believe they're that old. But given all that stuff he's done, what I'm going to say is kind of a shock if you're not familiar with that series and you weren't alive then. But Eastwood was not a good enough actor to be a lead character. And that is a fact. He was not a good enough actor. He never really was that great an actor. But back then, he wasn't a terrible actor. He was watchable. He was infinitely watchable. But he wasn't... His acting ability or his character or whatever wasn't forceful like Eric Fleming's was. And Eric Fleming was... What was he, about 41 or something when he left the series? 41 or 2? When he... Well... Not even, yeah, about 40. Nope. He was about 40. He was around 40 when he left the series. But he seemed to be older than he was. But he was a lot more dominant a character. And he was actually the star of the series. And Eastwood just could not carry a series. And not sure Eastwood ever again did a television series. But he cut his teeth on television a lot, like a lot of other actors did. You know, like Robert Redford and Warren Beatty and Robert Duvall. You know, all these actors. Charles Bronson, Steve McQueen. All of them cut their teeth on television. So, as we know, after that series went off the air, and Eastwood went and made all those spaghetti westerns, and the rest is history. But that show was pretty good. And the thing is, Eric Fleming had such a tragic life. I can't even believe he's been dead almost 60 years. But it wasn't, well, it was tragic in some ways, and it was good in other ways. But he had an abusive childhood. His dad was abusive to him. He ran away. I think he was 8 years old or something. And he made his way into the world. He was in the military. And then he got his face smashed by some heavy weight or something when he was in the military, and he had to have his face all patched up again. And I think he said to the effect he looked better after the surgery than beforehand. And then he went into acting because he liked it. And he was in that damn movie, Queen of Outer Space, and he was the love interest of Zsa Zsa Gabor. And then he went into television on this television series, and that really made him a star. So he did that for 7 of the 8 seasons that it was on. And then he had bought a ranch in Hawaii, and he was planning to retire. He wanted to retire and do other stuff. I think he was into sculpting. He was kind of a nonconformist, basically. He didn't look like he would have been, but he was. And he wanted to teach. And he had this girlfriend who was much younger than him, and her name was Lynn Garber, and they were planning to get married, you know, all this kind of thing. And, you know, they were planning this life, and he thought, well, he was in a movie called Glass Bottom Boat, I think it was, after he left Rawhide. And then he was going to retire, and he thought, well, I'll do one more thing. So he made this movie, or he was in the process of making a movie, and it was location shooting down in Peru. And it was for a short-lived television series catering to kids called We're Off to See the Wizard. So he was going to be in that. And he and this other actor whose name escapes me, and I'm not going to look it up, but they were doing a scene where they were in the river and they were in the rapids, and there was problems with the canoe or the kayak or whatever the hell they were in, and Eric Fleming was having a real tough time, and the other guy tried to save him, and then he couldn't, and then Fleming drowned, and his body went down the river, and they didn't find him till 3 days later. And his fiancée was right there and watched it, saw the whole thing. Holy shit. And so that, and then eventually, I think he was buried down there at the University of Peru or something. But isn't that the way it works? Sometimes you have this idea you're going to retire. It's usually older people. And you're going to do all this. You got all these plans. And then, damn it to hell, before you can do them, fate walks in and just steals it all away. So he was only 41, I want to say. He was born in 1925, I think. And he died in 1966. So I was like 11 years old, you know, and I remember that. And no, he wasn't eaten by piranhas, contrary to legend or rumor or whatever. And that was a terrible, terrible death. But anyway, Rawhide is still a good Western. But it's always funny, these television Westerns especially, you know, they use that same damn ranch in, I think it was San Fernando Valley or some damn place. You know, you'd see that in all the Westerns if they did location shootings. Or they went over to Lone Pine, you know, in California, Eastern California, and where all the moon rocks are. And that's where Barbara Stanwyck was scattered when she was cremated. Yeah, she's over there. But you see these over and over and over. It's so damn funny. And what was really hilarious was like Cimarron Strip. And you'd see old Stuart Whitman riding the horse at the end of the beginning and end of the series. And you know Oklahoma didn't look like that. That looked suspiciously like the Sierra Nevada or the San Gabriel Mountains or whatever the hell in California. Didn't look like Oklahoma, but it was supposed to be Oklahoma. But, you know, but anyway, they're a lot of fun. These shows are a lot of fun to watch, and I'm glad to revisit them. And I would not do streaming on these shows. I mean, you could do them on streaming, but the trouble is they'll yank it from their archives. Or they'll do like Amazon Prime did with It's a Wonderful Life and cut a key scene out of it. I mean, the movie isn't even a movie without it. And no thank you. I'll keep my physical media. As long as I can get a TV that'll work. And all that. So, anyhow, that's basically all I had to say. Oh, and a few years ago I was going to review Lawman. And I never got around to it, but I will say that one's probably my favorite one of all the series except for Maverick, because it was really good. Just excellent. And I recommend that show. And again, it was the optimal half-hour show. And maybe if they're doing all these Blu-ray shows and they're talking about Cheyenne, which was the one that kind of started all the flood of Westerns in the 1950s television, that maybe Warner's will go ahead and release all those other shows like 77 Sunset Strip and Bourbon Street Beat and Surfside 6 and so on and so forth. All those shows. They would be fun to see. And I do remember Hawaiian Eye. That's one that I remember that they had shown in reruns or a first run. I remember that one. And 77 Sunset Strip. But Colt 45, that was just a little bit before my time, unless I saw it in first run syndication. But anyway, that's just kind of a bunch of rambly thoughts about stuff for this new year. And there's not a whole hell of a lot going on in the country, except the fact that the WEP GPO repeal is now on, H.R. 82 is now on President Biden's desk. So he just has to sign it, and then it becomes law. So I'll get a little bit back from Social Security every month. So anyway, I'm going to just try to watch my favorite shows and try to enjoy this time with this shitty weather and not feeling 100%. So that is it for this long-winded video.